What if the one thing an alien empire trusted for centuries, their sacred crown of truth, suddenly chose a human prisoner as their future ruler? In a world where tradition is law and humans are seen as enemies, one man's bloodline unlocks a secret buried for generations. Now caught between rebellion, prophecy, and an unexpected connection with a powerful queen, he must decide, fight for escape, or become the spark that unites two worlds. This isn't just a story of survival, it's the beginning of a revolution. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. Nail's hands were bound tightly behind his back, the rough grip of the Zarelian guards pulling him down the endless hall of shining stone. His legs ached with each forced step, and his head throbbed from dehydration and days without sleep. The air inside the alien palace felt thick, humming with strange energy. Light shimmered across the curved ceilings like flowing water, and the walls pulsed with colors that changed as they passed. The Zarelian Empire was unlike anything on Earth. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. He stumbled but was yanked upright by the lead guard, whose scaled fingers dug deep into his arm. "Walk straight, human," the guard hissed, his voice sharp and cold. Nail, despite his pain, managed a small smirk. "I would if your hospitality hadn't been so charming," he muttered. His voice cracked from dryness, but the sarcasm was clear. Only a week earlier, Nail had stood proudly in front of the Zarelian Council, part of Earth's diplomatic mission to form peace. That dream had ended when the Zarelians found data suggesting Earth was hiding military plans. Nael, the mission's lead, had been taken first. Now they called him a spy. He didn't even know if the others from his team were still alive. The corridor opened into a grand chamber, the ceiling rising so high it seemed to touch the stars. Light drifted down from nowhere. The room was silent except for the faint sound of guards' boots on polished stone. At the far end, on a raised platform made of glowing crystal, sat the throne. It was carved from a single piece of some translucent gem, like frozen moonlight. And on it sat Queen Serenia. Nail's breath caught in his throat. Even through pain and fear, he couldn't help but be stunned. The queen was nothing like the images he had studied. Her skin was deep green, speckled, with silver, her eyes glowing violet. Two thin horns curved back from her temples, decorated with delicate rings of metal. She wore no crown. Instead, her presence alone demanded attention. She was quiet, still, and watched him with eyes that seemed to see straight through him. Voice echoed through the chamber. "Kneel before Her Majesty," said the guard captain standing to her right. Nail, still breathless, shook his head. "I represent Earth," he said with all the strength he could find. "I will stand." There was a ripple of surprise across the court. A few Zarelians whispered to each other. The guard captain stepped forward, hand on his weapon, but Queen Serenia raised her hand. The room went silent. "This human believes he still has dignity," she said, her tone curious, almost amused. Her voice was melodic, like a song sung in another world. Slowly she rose and stepped down from her throne. She circled Nail, studying him. He tried not to react as she moved close, her presence cool and electric. "Do you know why you are here, human?" she asked. Nail met her gaze. "Because your council doesn't understand the truth." With sudden speed, her hand shot forward, grabbing him by the throat. She lifted him off the ground with impossible strength, her face just inches from his. "Your kind talks of peace while preparing for war," she said, her tone sharp as ice. "Tell me why we should believe anything you say." Nail struggled to breathe but managed a rasping reply. "If I were lying, I'd already be dead." For a long moment her expression didn't change. Then, slowly, she let him down. He dropped to his knees, coughing. Her gaze lingered on him, and something flickered in her eyes. Was it respect? "Prisoner is not here just for questioning," Serenia announced to the court. "We will test him with the silent crown." Gasps echoed around the room. From a nearby pedestal, a guard retrieved an object unlike anything Nail had ever seen. It was a crown, but not like any Earth design. The metal looked alive, dark silver threaded with lines of faint blue light. It gave off no reflection, only a soft pulse like it was breathing. This was the artifact Nail had read about in briefings, an ancient crown said to reveal truth and judge worth. But it hadn't lit up for anyone in centuries, not even for Queen Sornia. The guard held it above Nail's head, the room tense with anticipation. Nothing was expected to happen. It was a formality, a show. But as the crown neared Nail, something impossible occurred. The threads of light within the metal flared, growing brighter. The entire crown began to glow, white, blue, and brilliant. The light spilled across the room and stunned gasps broke the silence. The guard nearly dropped it in shock. Queen Serenia's face changed. Her mouth opened, her hands trembling. It's glowing, she whispered. Counselors rushed forward, shouting protests. This must be a trick, one cried. A human can't be chosen. Silence, Serenia commanded. She stepped forward, her voice steadier now, but her expression unreadable. The crown has not shone for any noble in 3 centuries. Now it reacts to him. She turned to Nael, her eyes filled with something strange. Awe, fear, wonder. Do you understand what this means? She asked. Nael, still kneeling, shook his head. No, I don't. Serenia looked at the crown, then back at him. It means you have been chosen, not as a liar, not as a threat. She paused, the words difficult to say. But as my consort. The chamber erupted into chaos, voices shouting over each other. But Nael only heard the queen's voice echoing in his mind again and again. Chosen. Nael sat on the edge of a bed far too soft for someone who had been dragged from a cell just hours before. The walls of his new room shimmered with warm colors, and the air smelled faintly of something sweet and unfamiliar. The furnishings were fit for a royal guest, but the guards posted outside the door reminded him that he was still a prisoner. Or something stranger than that. He rubbed his wrist where the restraints had been, still trying to make sense of what had happened. The crown had chosen him. He didn't even know what that really meant. The door slid open with a quiet hiss, and Queen Serenia stepped into the room. She no longer wore her formal robes. Her outfit was simpler now, still regal, but less intimidating. Her eyes, those deep violet pools, fixed on him. Nael stood quickly, unsure of what to do. She nodded, almost in greeting, and walked slowly around the room, observing everything but saying nothing. I assume your accommodations are more comfortable, she said after a long silence. They're certainly better than the dungeon, Nael replied cautiously. But I'm guessing I'm not here on vacation. The corners of her mouth twitched, like the beginning of a smile, but it faded quickly. You are here because the crown, which has rejected every potential royal match for over 300 years, responded to you. A human. That is not something we can ignore. I didn't do anything, Nael said, his voice calm. I just stood there. Exactly, she said. Which is why we must understand why. Later that day, he was taken to a high-security lab deep in the palace. The space was filled with glowing monitors and floating displays. The technology, so advanced it seemed like magic. There he met Dr. Islan, a Zarelian researcher with pale scales and soft eyes that held more curiosity than judgment. She welcomed him with a small nod. We've scanned your biological data, she explained as she showed him holograms of DNA strands. And we found something unexpected. Nael stepped closer, squinting at the strange images. I'm not a scientist. You'll have to spell it out. Dr. Islan tapped the air and a new sequence appeared, 2 DNA strands side by side. This one is yours, she said. And this is from our ancient royal archives. He frowned. What are you saying? You carry a tiny trace of Zarelian DNA, she said gently. Almost invisible, likely passed down over many generations. Nael's breath caught in his throat. That's not possible. It is, Queen Serenia said quietly. She had remained silent until now, watching from a distance. Centuries ago, there were secret projects, early contact. Between humans and Xerelians, not all of it was peaceful. Some genetic blending may have happened without the public knowing. Nail's thoughts raced. His father had disappeared during an expedition near Xerelian space. Could there have been more to that than he knew? He felt a strange mix of anger and wonder. Who was he really? Dr. Islan continued. The crown chooses based on more than loyalty or politics. It searches for the strongest match, one that could lead to a future ruler with abilities to unite, lead, and survive. You fit that profile. Nail turned to Serenia. So I'm not just some political threat anymore. I'm a genetic solution? The queen didn't flinch. I don't know what you are. That's why you're still alive, and why the council is terrified. Over the next few days, Nail and Serenia were forced to spend more time together. Their conversations, at first tense and guarded, slowly began to shift. She asked him about Earth, about his childhood, his beliefs. He asked about the history of her people, their traditions, their fears. They still argued, often, but the tone changed. The sharpness dulled. Questions became conversations. They listened. One evening, while walking through the palace gardens under a sky of twin moons, Nail paused beside a glowing tree. Do you still think I'm dangerous? He asked, not turning toward her. Serenia stepped beside him. I think you are unpredictable, she said slowly, and that scares those who built their power on certainty. Do you? He asked. She looked at him then, her eyes softer than he'd seen them. Not as much as I used to. Their peace was interrupted days later by growing unrest in the court. Counselor Luthen and other traditionalists were spreading fear, calling Nail a weapon in disguise. Whispers of rebellion echoed through the palace halls. But something had changed, not just in the queen's heart, but among the people. Some, Xerelians, especially the younger ones, began to speak in favor of truth, of change, of hope. Dr. Islan's research was leaked, possibly by someone within the court. The idea that a hybrid future might heal the growing infertility among Xerelians took root. Still, danger pressed in from all sides. The bond between Nail and Serenia was growing, but so were the risks. One night, as they stood on the palace balcony watching the stars, Nail said, I don't know what happens next. Neither do I, she admitted. But for the first time, I think that might be a good thing. He looked at her, seeing not just a queen but a person caught in a web of duty, legacy, and impossible choices. And he realized he wasn't just a prisoner anymore. They were both trapped in something much bigger. And maybe, just maybe, they were the key to breaking free. The sky over the palace was unusually dark, and the air held a heavy silence that pressed on everything. Nail couldn't sleep. He paced his chamber uneasy. Though the bed was comfortable and the room quiet, a strange tension lingered in the air. Something was wrong. He'd felt it all day, whispers in the halls, quick glances between guards, and the queen's distracted expression during their last meeting. It was like the palace itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the floor, followed by the shriek of alarms. Nail jumped, rushing to the window. A plume of smoke rose from one of the outer towers. The door to his room burst open, and Commander Tressa entered, eyes sharp and voice urgent. We have to move, she said, tossing him a cloak. There's been a coup. Malvin's forces have taken the main council chambers. Nail's heart pounded. Where's Queen Serenia? She's in danger. We believe she's been captured, Tressa said. Come, now. Nail followed her down narrow service corridors lit only by red emergency lights. The palace was chaos. Shouts echoed in every direction. Loyal guards clashed with rebels in the distance. Tressa led him to a small group of soldiers hiding near the archives. They looked tired but determined. We're outnumbered, one whispered. Malvin has most of the council behind him. He's calling Serenia unfit to rule and claims you've corrupted the crown. Nail felt a cold wave of fear. What will they do to her? Tressa's expression hardened. They've scheduled a public execution at dawn. First you, then her. He wants to erase the crown's choice and scare anyone who supported it. Nail's stomach turned. He didn't know how. Things had spiraled so quickly. Just days ago they were talking about peace and understanding. Now their lives hung by a thread. We have to stop him, he said. They made a plan. Tressa would lead half the team to disable the broadcast tower that Malvin planned to use to announce his false rule. Nael, along with 2 others, would try to reach the council chamber, where the crown was being displayed as a trophy, but they were too late. As they approached the inner courtyard, Malvin's guards spotted them. A short, brutal fight broke out. Nael fought as best as he could using one of the pulse pistols Tressa had given him. He had no military training, but adrenaline made him fast. They reached the council chamber doors just as they were sealing shut. There's another way in, Nael said, spotting a vent above. With help, he climbed into it and crawled through the tight passage. When he dropped into the chamber, Malvin was already there, standing in front of the glowing crown. Malvin turned, sneering. So the Queen's pet arrives. Nael raised his weapon. Step away from the crown. Malvin laughed, lifting the crown in his hands. This thing has poisoned our future. No more. He drew back his arm to smash it, but the doors behind him burst open. Queen Sorenya entered, flanked by Tressa and the remaining loyal guards. She rushed forward, tackling Malvin before he could destroy the crown. It flew from his hands and rolled to Nael's feet. He picked it up carefully, and the light inside flared bright once more. Gasps filled the room as the remaining council members watched in disbelief. The crown was alive again, glowing as if to remind them of its decision. End this now, Sorenya said, holding Malvin pinned. Call off your men. But he refused, spitting words of hate and tradition. It was only when the loyal guards surrounded him, and Nael placed the crown back on its pedestal, that his resistance finally crumbled. The fight was over. Malvin was arrested, and the broadcast tower was secured. But the danger wasn't fully gone. The palace was still tense. The people were watching. The council was divided. Later, Sorenya and Nael stood together in the central hall. Their faces were tired, clothes torn from the battle, but they stood tall. Sorenya looked out at the nobles and the crowd beyond the palace gates, her voice steady and strong. The crown chose him, she said, not because he is human, but because he carries something vital, truth, courage, and a piece of our shared past. I will not turn from that. The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to Nael. He stepped forward. I came here to build peace. I didn't expect this, but I believe in the crown's choice too. Not because of what it means for power, but because of what it means for both our worlds. A slow wave of nods spread through the room. Not all were convinced, but enough were willing to listen. That night, Sorenya and Nael stood on a balcony overlooking the city, the stars bright above them. The worst had passed, but the road ahead was uncertain. I was ready to give up everything, she said softly. So was I, he replied. She turned to him. What happens now? He reached for her hand. Now, we try to build something better, together, and this time they both believed it was possible. The first sunrise after the coup was different, softer, warmer. As the golden light spread across the towers of the Zerelian capital, the city felt like it was holding its breath. The streets were quiet, the skies clear. Queen Sorenya stood at the window of her private chamber watching as the day began. Beside her, Nael adjusted his ceremonial sash, still getting used to the formal robes and the attention that came with them. They had survived the storm, but both knew it wasn't truly over. A future had opened, but it still had to be built, one moment at a time. In the days following Malvin's arrest, news of the truth had begun to spread. The recordings from the council chamber, the glowing crown, and the confession of the rebellion's leaders were shared across the empire. Most Zerelians had never trusted humans, many still didn't. But the sight of the crown, a sacred object of history and power, shining for Nael, had shaken the strongest beliefs. People were questioning, wondering, and in that wondering, hope began to grow. Dr. Islin's research had been officially released to the Scientific Council. Her findings showing that Nail's DNA held Xerelian traces and that a union between the two species could lead to stronger, healthier offspring spread faster than politics ever could. It was no longer just a matter of tradition. Now, it was about survival and a future for both races. In the heart of the capital, construction had begun on a new facility, a joint Earth-Xerelian research and cultural exchange center. It was small at first, symbolic more than anything, but it sent a message. Unity was no longer an idea, it was a plan in motion. Representatives from Earth had arrived, not as prisoners or diplomats under suspicion, but as honored guests. For the first time in history, both species stood side by side as equals. Nail walked through the eternal gardens with Sorenya one evening, the light of the twin moons glowing through the leaves of the bioluminescent trees. They had walked these paths many times before, once as strangers, then as reluctant allies, and now as something neither of them dared name aloud. They didn't speak at first. They didn't have to. The silence between them was filled with quiet understanding. After a while, Nail turned to her. "There's something peaceful about this place," he said. "It doesn't feel like part of the palace, more like another world." Sorenya nodded. "It was designed that way, a place where leaders could remember what they're fighting for." He looked at her, truly seeing the woman behind the crown. "You could have walked away, denied what the crown showed. It would have been easier." Her gaze met his, steady and calm. "I thought about it, but every time I did, I remembered the moment the crown lit up. It wasn't just about me, or you. It was about something bigger, something that deserved a chance." Their hands touched, a gentle brush at first, then a firm grip. It no longer mattered if others watched. Their connection had been forged in fire and choice. It was real. At the first interspecies gathering, a crowd of both Xerelians and humans filled the royal amphitheater. Flags of both worlds hung above the stage. Nael stood beside Sorenya, watching as a young girl named Senna stepped forward. She was the child of a human father and a Xerelian mother, born in secret on a border colony. Her existence had once been seen as a threat. Today, she was a symbol. Senna walked up to the ancient crown resting on its pedestal and placed her small hand upon it. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, softly, the crown began to glow. Not bright, not dramatic, but warm, steady, alive. The crowd gasped, but no one spoke. They didn't need to. In that moment, they saw what was possible. Not only had the crown chosen once, it had recognized a future that was already becoming. Later, as the stars began to fill the night sky, Nael and Sorenya stood on a balcony overlooking the celebration. Music filled the air. Laughter echoed in the distance. For the first time in a long time, the palace felt alive. "This is just the beginning," Sorenya said. Nael nodded. "Beginnings are enough. The rest will come." She turned to face him, her expression soft and open. "I never thought I'd feel this way. Not about a human, not about anyone." "I didn't think I'd feel anything again after the mission failed," he replied. "But here we are." They stood in silence once more, the stars bright above them. Neither knew what would come next. There would be challenges, resistance, moments of doubt, but there would also be progress, discovery, and maybe even peace. As the wind moved gently through the trees, and the lights of the city shimmered in the distance, the crown rested quietly on its pedestal inside the palace, still glowing, still watching. A new light had appeared among the stars, not born of power or fear, but of choice, courage, and connection. And it was only the beginning.